Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in to the StudioMEcast. Don't change that channel because there isn't another one. I am joined today at StudioME Speakeasy here in East Liberty by another special guest, and if you like the look and sound of this podcast, you can rent out this space at StudioME.me for your first or next podcast. We also have other studio spaces, which you might see in other episodes of our show, but let me just dive right into this because I'm joined in the studio today by Kaleigh Fitzgerald, who is a writer and director of Bokeh Pictures, which is her LLC. Kaleigh Fitzgerald has done reality television, narrative work, features, shorts, all kinds of stuff, and she holds a master's in writing for screenplays as well. And we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff, but today I'm just going to dive in at the moment and just say, Kaleigh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, right off the bat, you've talked a little bit before we start recording that you're very into TV versus movies sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into media as a writer-director, was it television or film, or what got you into it?
So I started very young, actually. Not to talk about my childhood forever, but there was this toy I got for Christmas one year. It was called a digital blue cam, and it came with a computer game. You know, it's just something like the early 2000s. You'd always get those computer games that came with a toy that you'd plug into the computer. That one was a camera, and so then I started to film funny news shows or funny little short films with my cousins and stuff. And with that program, I could drag animations onto things, so I could make an alien invasion or oh no, there's an avalanche, and I just had a video of my friend chucking snowballs at me, little things like that. And so that's kind of where it started, and then it evolved in high school. And in high school, I took a lot of risks. I actually made a 45-minute horror film in high school, and that's actually how I got into college. I used that as my behind the scenes on my set of -5. Don't find it. It's nowhere. I removed it from YouTube. But that's kind of how I started, but have evolved since then to more of the coming of age, drama stuff, and really got into TV, honestly, after I graduated my undergrad and started working for bigger companies like NBC, Universal, and worked out in LA for a couple of months for a second season of a show that unfortunately got canceled.
So as your work has, career journey, all that has evolved, has there been a guiding, maybe a guiding light for something that you've always wanted to do, or do you just take as it interests you? What's kind of been your compass? I mean,
not to sound cheesy, but I think my compass comes from the stories that I tell, because a lot of my stories, they come from that personal space and then learning how to fictionalize them. So where I really kind of knew that I wanted to keep doing this forever was when I attempted my first feature film, The Way That I Am. It's currently on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and a bunch of other little apps. But what happened was one of the people in my life that kind of always supported me was my grandmother. She died. There was a whole situation that happened where I just started to feel really alone, because a lot of people didn't necessarily understand what I do. Because whenever you're creative, it's well, how do you get health insurance, or how do you do this? And so I ended up writing a film based off of losing her and losing myself, and learning that you have to be happy as an individual before you can be with anyone else. And through raising $50,000 at the age of 22, wow, and shooting the feature on and off while working for companies like Netflix, I was able to say, oh, I can do this. And once that kind of happened, I was it doesn't matter how long it takes. It just matters how much you care and the people that care around you. And if you continue to be vulnerable and let other people in, you can tell some really amazing stories.
That's what a story you've just told. That's so fascinating to me. That's the guiding light being your stories that you tell, them coming from a personal space. You've already had these experiences in your field and personal life. Mm-hmm. Are the films that you make, would you say that, do they bear a similarity to the types of films or shows that you like to watch?
Yes and no. So it really just depends on like the mindset that I'm in at the time. And like a lot of the times, like when it comes to writing, whatever charges me at the moment that I'm dealing with or have experienced, like I will kind of lean into that, and then I would find references to study. And I basically, this is the master degree in me, but I'll like build my own curriculum to kind of have my own journey to write the thing that I'm going to focus on at the time. So like one of my projects that I'm currently working on is called Work-Life Balance. And it does actually come from a real experience that I went through, which I got in a car crash, and I crashed into the back of a truck. And this was during COVID, and I was juggling multiple jobs while trying to, like, heal from the, injuries and stuff. And when that happened, like, it really, like, messed with my head for a while, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to create again or not or whatever. And then I started to watch shows like Fleabag and was like,
love Fleabag.
Oh, you're allowed to laugh at things even though they're depressing. Okay, maybe I should try and take this core memory that I now have and figure out a way to fictionalize it and make it so it's more accessible to any audience member. And that's kind of like how I go through like my writing process, because I have that, which is like more of like a drama, like comedy, more drama. But then I also have that like funny, like make fun of yourself type thing. So I've been a bridesmaid a lot. I love all of you, by the way. I've been a bridesmaid 7 times already.
Wow.
And so I make this joke that being a bridesmaid should be tax deductible. And, like when you get to like a certain age, like I'm 32, like they're like, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to have your house and all this stuff? And so like using that kind of energy in another personal way, but laughing about it is a totally different direction. So it really just comes down to like thinking about what shows match that energy. So in the case of that project, which is called Adulting, and it's about trying to get your shit together, that one is more influenced from like New Girl and like that kind of energy. So I do have a lot of favorite shows and movies and stuff, and sometimes I do apply them to my own work. But I also do feel that I also take time to explore things to help me like with my writing at the end of the day, and then those actually become some of my favorite shows too.
That's wonderful. Yeah, the whole one of the things you brought up earlier about how you got started with this by creating, because some people, it's like they see a movie and then they're like, I want to do that, and sometimes it's like you said with your first feature, the doing of it is when you were like, this is what I want to do forever. Yeah. Now your primary, like you have a master's in writing, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
But you'd say would you say your primary like love in all this stuff that you do is directing, or?
I would say yeah, it's directing, but I mean like I've been told so many times that you can't just say I'm a director like whenever you're in school.
That? Oh,
like
in school.
Because then it's like yes, school.
Gotcha.
And so then when you graduate, it's like, oh, okay, what am I gonna do? And so like for me, I found love in a bunch of different like departments, and it actually has helped me become a more well-rounded director because I was able to experience interacting with a lot of different people because of different responsibilities I've had on different projects. So not only did I like for my own creativity like start like at a young age, but also my industry knowledge. I actually started working when I was 16. So when I was 16, I worked on a commercial because I had to intern for like a book report and was able to connect with, ironically, the kids I was babysitting across the street. Their aunt was a producer in town.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm hanging out with you at the cookout. And they were like, yeah, come to this commercial. And so I was 16. I worked on a commercial. I learned production design, all this other stuff. And then when I went to college, she started hooking me up with other gigs. So even though I was in school, I got to work on The Dark Knight Rises and was there the day that the football field exploded. And it was
cool.
my job to get everybody else to scream in winter clothing in the summer. But so like I got to kind of feel that adrenaline rush early, and it just kept making me want to keep pushing myself more and more and more. And when I graduated college, I got to work on a Christmas movie called, I'm going to botch this potentially, but Love the Coopers, with Diane Keaton, John Goodman, Alan Arkin, Marissa Tomei, Amanda Seyfried. Like, they all came to town, and it was my first time like as a PA, and that was when I was like also hooked. Wow. But it was cool because that was happening at the same time I was writing that feature. I was actually writing that feature in that production office.
Wow.
And I would have conversations with the cleaning lady at night, because I was the one that would close up shop, and she was like, so you really, really want to do this? And it was cool, because I was like, I mean, I know people don't normally like to talk to, like, other workers that are, like, running around if you don't know them, but I got to make, like, a really close friend, and we still talk to this day, and she's always like, I'm cheering you on. So, I don't know, it's just those two things kind of, like, came together.
That's great. I love that. Now, one of the things that I'm thinking of right now for all this stuff you're saying, which is, like, when you're in your early 20s, you're raising 50 grand, you're getting on the set of Dark Knight Rises, you're doing your feature, your NBC, all this stuff you've done. Is there a point where you feel, I guess, I don't know, intimidated by the size of the work that you're pursuing?
Well, fun fact. So I worked on a bunch of shows, lots of weird reality TV shows. I could tell you stories for days about Hoarders, American Ninja Warrior, and like this crazy like gangster show I had to work on. Like,
I'd love to hear those stories, but I don't want to derail your thought.
Definitely will. Maybe later in the podcast. Right. But so I worked on all these different things, and I was learning stuff from commercials, reality, and features, and finally was able to get into TV, because my break for TV was I kept taping my resume on a box that would get brought to our production office for that Christmas movie, and then I would go deliver it to the TV show that started downstairs, which was Banshee with HBO Max. Huh. And so anytime I got mail by accident, I would tape my resume to it, and I'd go deliver it downstairs. And they eventually hired me, and I became a travel assistant, and that's how I ended up learning a lot more producing experience. But I was with them for a while and got to go to LA for a couple of months. And then that second season of a show called Gone, unfortunately got canceled in the middle. I had 4 different positions on that show. Wow. I was a showrunner's assistant, writer's assistant, producer's assistant, and the actor Chris Noth, I was his assistant. Wow. He's in Sex and the City and plays Mr. Big. My mom was like so jealous of me, and I was like, we can figure out a way for you to meet him, and then she got too scared and like backed out. But that happened, and that specific gig like changed me. Like Gone, like they are like my film family, like my 2 mentors. I call them my film fathers, and it's like a total like joke. Like, and they're like, they call me like their film kid or whatever. Like, I just saw them last year before the writer's strike to like reconnect. But when that happened and I came back, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I like worked my butt off and like hit every single thing I needed to do to get my break. But because season 2 got canceled, I feel like I have to start all over again. And so then I ended up working on a couple of shows locally here, and there was a minor breaking point where my grandfather was in the hospital, and I was working 2 jobs at the same time for a company that I will not say, and I had to choose like family over what I love. Like, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And then eventually I was like, you know what? If you want me to continue working here, I have to work from home so I can be with my family. And that was kind of when I had to take a step back and like truly evaluate like how immersed I was versus like how out of touch I was with all of the people that I care about, like my family, my friends, like all this kind of stuff. Because a lot of the times, like when you are a creative and you're trying to like push for that dream all the time, like you kind of forget to live the rest of your life, especially if like you love it so much and it's something like I've been passionate about. Like, but so like at that point, when that happened, I had to take a step back, and then I had to think about, like, what else can I do where I can still be connected to my craft, but still be there for my loved ones in this time of need.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I started working back at my undergrad, Point Park University, and eventually became a professor. And I learned how fun it was to connect with younger creatives and get them inspired and have them feel the way that I felt. But then after a couple of years, I started to realize, okay, now that everything has settled, like with your family and your friends, and you kind of like are starting to get your footing again, don't give up on your own dream. Like, you have to go back for it. It doesn't matter how old you are. As long as you continue to push and you continue to care, eventually something's going to happen. So a couple years ago is when I kind of got like back into shows. Like, I think I had like a break from working on shows for like 2 years.
Wow.
And then had to like come back and reset. So like that's kind of how Bokeh Pictures was born. That was my reset button, my new beginning.
Now, I want to take it back just a few sentences to how you, like, you had this moment here just now where you talked about, like, you got to keep going for this and eventually something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you were thinking about at the time, or is that something that you've processed in retrospect?
I think it's something that I've processed after, because at first I was just trying to figure out a way to like reconnect with what I care about, just telling stories, and that was through a project called Swipe. So I started to write that script while I was in the ABC Legendary Pictures production office. Like, now I'm like just like leaking, like, hey, I'm working on other stuff when you didn't need me to do something. But that's what all PAs do, just so you guys know. So I was working on that then, and then I like put a pause on the project for a while. And then like COVID came, and you know, like everybody like kind of got into their own holes, and they're like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to create again, all this stuff. And like, thank God for Krista Graham and Jordan Belts. Like, Krista like approached me on Facebook and was like, I miss making stuff with you, because she was in my feature, and I was like, I miss making stuff with you too. She's like, I just wish you had like something else that we could like start to do. And I was like, well, I actually have this, like the script's not done. And I sent it to her, and she's like, I'm literally this one character. What the heck? Why don't we make this? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, I always thought that the lead could be Jordan Belts. Like, at the time when we met, she was actually a student of mine in a production assistant workshop first.
Oh, cool.
And then like I like started to like step away from teaching, and she graduated and she grew into her own, and like then she was interested in producing and like approached me, and then Chris was like, let's pull Jordan in. And so we started to produce during COVID Swipe. So then by the time like the COVID restrictions started to kind of lift, we were able to shoot 45 pages in 7 days.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And then I went to my master's, and that's like the reset button. It was Swipe and going for my master's for writing for the screen.
Fantastic. So what would be, I'm not sure if there's a way to answer this, because I'm asking you something I don't know about, because I don't have a master's in anything. But what's one of the things that getting your master's, apart from obviously your degree, what's something that I guess you came away with like in your growth as a writer?
I mean, honestly, like the program I was in, it was with Point Park, and I have so much respect for Elise Dehane and Matt Pelfrey, who run that program. And like what I got out of it is they made me feel comfortable telling stories where I didn't have to always like personally pull from my own life. So like one of the coolest things that I did like while I was in my master's is I wrote a sci-fi called Headspace, and it was like based off of like Orphan Black, Inception, and Altered Carbon. I don't live in the future. I don't.
Not yet.
Not yet. I will soon, hopefully. But like I don't know. That was like the first time that I just wrote something because it was inspired by like art around me, and I didn't have to infuse myself entirely into the script, and it was still good. So like that was when I was like, oh, I did grow. And then I like shot like a proof of concept trailer for it. In a whole Megadeck series, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But, like, when that happened, that was my wake-up call. It was like, hey, you don't need to just always tell your personal story, but you can still put your own, like, personal voice into things. And, like, I learned that from, like, attending a bunch of different panels. Like, I talked to somebody who was a part of, like, Russian Doll on Netflix, and she was saying, like, as long as you put your own voice in the script, even if it's in the action, or maybe, like, sometimes maybe a character kind of speaks the way that you do, it still creates a connection to that story, even though you've never fully experienced it yourself. And for me, like, that's why I went back for my master's, and I felt like I was able to level up my writing skill. I was able to, like, get back into the saddle, and, like, having those deadlines and those my fellow, like, classmates and my teachers rooting for me, and, like, the master's solely being about writing scripts every semester, I was able to get 6 different projects out of 2 years.
Wow, that's a nice turnaround time on that. So, yeah, that's a great way, because you're, like, weaving this together for me, which is awesome. Because you talked about, you know, your personal experiences informing what you're doing, but we also now have, like, getting into sci-fi, and just when I was looking at some of the stuff you've done and seeing, like, horror, drama, sci-fi, comedy, dark comedy, you know, all that, bit of romance here and there, you know, that kind of thing.
I'm not a one-trick pony.
Right, yeah. Well, so I guess, is there a genre that you haven't worked in yet that you'd like to, you know, do at some point?
Funny enough, it would be action, and that's kind of why, like, at the end of this month, we're forming, like, a 48 team, and I tried to pull all of the action creators in town to join the team. So I'm like, I don't know what genre we're going to get, but you're going to do a flip. Like, that's, like, pretty much, like, where we're at right now. But I'm hoping that, like, when we come together, like, for that 48, like, we'll all be able to connect and grow, and then we can hopefully shoot an action at a later date, because I just think that would be so much fun.
Yeah, one of the things that I would love to do myself is I haven't really done a project that I was producing that had, like, an official stunt in it, really, that, like, had a stunt coordinator. Like, there's been stuff where it's like, oh, the dancer's doing a flip, and not that that isn't a stunt or anything, but, you know, I'd like to...
But it's not like punching someone in the face or a kick or something?
I mean, like, because there's... I mean, like, having, like, I don't know, a body harness where, like, someone gets hit and then they get thrown that way.
Oh, Matrix style.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I want to do a project at some point in the near future where there's just one stunt in it. You know, just, like, where there's someone doing something that, like, you have to be a professional in order to do this thing, not just get your crazy friend from high school to jump off something when you're doing a home video. Yeah,
the amount of texts you get, like, I got one recently that was just like, this is non-union, sister. I will roll out of a car or jump off of a roof. And I was like, no, you won't. Like,
yeah, right, exactly.
That's still liability, buddy.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing where, like, I'd like to, that, as far as, like, boxes to check for me, the next one that I'm really looking at is an actual honest-to-goodness, here's the stunt, you know, thing.
I wrote this for this.
Basically, yeah, we'll see. But on that note, also something you said earlier that I identify with is putting a hold on doing new projects until the old ones are done, with the exception of smaller or, like, shorter term.
Yes.
Not smaller, shorter term. Projects like the 48, like, I did a music video in the fall because it had been a while since I'd done something that was just, you know.
Exactly.
You're doing a 48. You're looking at finishing up some of these other longer-term projects that you have going on. But one of the things that I want to know a little bit about that, or is, because you're doing the 48 at the end of this month, right?
Yeah, it's technically Cinco de Mayo weekend, so I guess it's the beginning of next month.
Oh, great, awesome. So yeah, I'm not doing the 48 this year. I love the 48. I'll be at the screening.
Come play with us. Like,
maybe I will.
That's literally my pitch. It's like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing it. No, come play with us.
All right. Well, if that's a real invitation, I'll see what I'm doing.
It is.
Okay.
Not
good.
Just because the cameras are rolling.
All right. Sounds good. But yeah, so we've covered, like, different genres and your own personal experiences. with this. I guess it sounds like what you're doing right now is already fun, right? But is there, and we talked a bit about your work evolving over the years, is there somewhere that you're still trying to get to? Is there like, do you want to do like your own A-list Dark Knight Rises thing? Do you want to have your own show? Is there a billion things? Like, what is there a goal that you have at the moment that you're still like chasing?
You're giving me the what is the dream talk right now, aren't you?
What's a little? I mean, it might be this. It's a good dream if like, it's like, you know. But yeah, is there a like, just for you, something that you're going to?
I mean, for me, what I really want to do is to work in television. I think television is one of the coolest ways that you can get to know a character, because you're not just spending 90 minutes with them.
In television as a director?
As a showrunner. I'd probably say it like as a showrunner over a director, because in television, a director doesn't have as much control as people think. It's kind of like movies are where the directors rule, but then TV is where the showrunners are. And like the thing that's really cool about showrunning is that it is a form of directing, but you're still connected to the writing, which I think is the thing that's like the most important to me. Is like that writer-director combo is like so hard to find sometimes. And I'm like, oh, there's a job position. It's just not called writer-director. It's literally called showrunner. And basically being able to like form a team together to get people excited about a project, to be able to let different people put in their own like spins on different characters, to build a really cool story that a bunch of people want to watch. Like, that's the thing that like I want to do. And so I've been working on a lot of proof of concept trailers and while finishing and cleaning up a bunch of scripts that I've submitted to a couple of different competitions and have placed in some of them, which has been really nice. But being able to build your portfolio and actually like try to get like the agent manager thing, like that's my new dream right now. Like I want to really try and see, could I make it out there?
Well, let's dive right into that, because we've talked a little bit about how we're going to talk about building portfolios and pitch decks and all that, and let's go in. This is that chapter
this
of
is
the
podcast.
Segment. Yeah, so for like pitch deck versus portfolio for people just tuning in. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Can you just give us a brief description of what those are and how they're helpful to you?
So pitch deck is specifically one project based. So if I'm going to make like a sci-fi and I need a crap ton of money for specifically the sci-fi, I'm going to make a pitch deck. I would also use that same document for when I want to see if I can get it picked up on like a bigger network or something. It's a device that I would essentially call like a slideshow, where you're going through and you're focusing on like, what's the tone of my show? What's the marketing strategy for my show? What are my comps for my show? And comps are like the shows that inspired me to write this, or the shows that helped me kind of like find a space where this show belongs. And then you go into like your character background, what the story arcs are, depending on if it's a feature or if it's a TV show. Like you talk about how many seasons you could write, how many episodes there are. You don't have to have all of the episodes written, just the pilot and maybe one other episode. For the feature, you have to have the feature script, but it's basically a package that you build to get people excited about your project, because it's really hard to get people to read your scripts these days, because attention span has just like lowered so much. And having like the ability to have that package all in one place to send them is what will help you succeed in hopefully getting that next project made. So then a portfolio is a bunch of them. So like a portfolio would be, now they are doing it like in website based. So basically like I'm in the process of building a website, and I'm going to have like, hey, here are all of my scripts that are available for anybody to read. Hey, here is my resume of all of my professional credits. Here are all of my independent film credits. Here are my awards. It's basically like your website has now become your resume. And then when people see like, oh, I'm really interested in this project you have online, can you tell me more about it? One of the steps that you go through is you say, I would love to have a meeting with you to discuss. And that's when you show that slideshow and you go through, whether it's on Zoom, because they do a lot of Zoom pitches now, or you go into, like, if you're in LA, go to, like, the conference room or a coffee shop and you're going through a laptop and it's like a off-the-record conversation. It's a way to just get people visually into what's in your head faster. So then when they do want to read the script, they already know what the world looks like, who the characters could be, because you want to have as many different actors that you think could potentially play the role. Like, you don't want to say, like, oh, I wrote a sci-fi and the star has to be Paul Rudd. You're not going to get Paul Rudd. Right. So you have to be like,
sorry. Oh, we're good.
So you have to be like, what are other actors in this medium that I'm telling, whether it's TV or movies, like, that I could also put up for grabs. So it's like, I'll have a picture of Paul Rudd, but then I'll have a picture of maybe 3 other actors too. And so, like, it gets the producers to start thinking, how am I going to make this? And that's the shortest way I could probably explain it.
So, yeah, in a lot of ways, the pitch deck is to get them to read the script and to understand it better.
Yeah, it's a pathway. Like, that's
really cool.
how I would say it. Because, like, when you are trying to get your own work out there and you don't have, like, the credit yet to be able to just say, hey, read the script. Like,
right.
You have to start out with, like, small. You have to start out with the query letter, which is just an email. Then after you get past the email, like, you can have a phone call or a coffee date or whatever. And if you get past that, like, then you can do the pitch deck. And then if you get past that, then they'll read the script. And then if you get past that, then you're getting something made. And nobody tells you about this stuff. Nobody tells you about this step-by-step process, like, unless you are really, truly trying to immerse yourself in the industry.
Yeah, it's one of those things that even, it's not just one of the things that they don't teach you in film school. It's one of those things that even if you're, like, you know, neck deep in video tutorials on YouTube about filmmaking and all that, it's like, this is an essential part of the process that I think people have probably the most questions about, or it's where most of their answers are. How do I get in? You know, it's like, I've been to panels and all that where the most common question that they had was, you know, how do you get someone to read your script? And it's like, this method that you're bringing together also with, you know, you haven't always been able to just show someone the trailer of your movie before it's made to get them to realize, oh, I can read this script now. And I think that's brilliantly awesome. Yeah, I love that. So, for those pitch decks, now, who are you sending these emails to? Is this like you're just cold emailing production companies?
Absolutely not. You cannot cold email. They will go, bye-bye. Like, so the way that you have to do it is you have to build your network, and you have to build trust with that network. So when I had that job that I talked about earlier with NBC and Universal, I got really close to the producers that I was working with. The one producer, he actually created Hannah Montana. And then, ironically enough, said, bye, Disney, I'm going to work on CSI Miami now. So I don't know, you know, like, fun pop star to murdered? I don't know. But I got...
He's not a one-trick pony either.
Exactly. And I make that joke to him, and he's like, oh, I go, oh, Barry, you get the best of both worlds. He goes, are you literally using Hannah Montana against me? He's like, yeah. But, you know, like, you're together in the trenches on 12, 15-hour days, and eventually, like, when, like, the work cools down for a second, there is that opportunity where they say, if you are working for the right person, mind you, they say, what do you want to do, Kaleigh? What's your story? And if you don't have an idea ready, you just blew your window. So, and that's, like, only one of the paths. Like, another path is that you can start joining different communities. Like, even though I don't live in LA, I visit LA a couple times a year to still immerse myself in the culture and the people that are out there. And the nice thing now is, since COVID, you don't have to be in LA to work for television, because they have Zoom writers' rooms now. And so I've joined a bunch of different Discord groups, and, like, they have a bunch of mixers. Some of them are online. I'll meet those people online, and then I plan to go out there in person and say, hey, let's reconnect. And then they tell me, hey, I know this agent or I know this manager. Like, I really love getting to know your story. Like, we're in totally two different lanes, and the least I can do is help you if you're helping me. Like, people need to stop being selfish, I think, is one of the biggest pieces of advice that I could give, because they're like, I'm not going to share my connections with anybody, or I'm going to blow my window. No. If you're sharing, that's caring, and then those people, hopefully, if they're the right people, they're going to care, and then they're going to share, and then you're going to find the right person to send your stuff to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a great example, too, what you said of if you don't have an idea of what you want to do and you blow your window with that, because there's, sometimes people talk about meeting the right person at the right time, being in the right place, all that stuff, but the flip side of that is you also have to be the right person in the right place at the right time.
Exactly.
When I was like 18, there were a couple of opportunities that I got that I wasn't ready for. I'm useless. Like, I don't know how to do anything here. And it's like, I'm like, man, if I was like 30 and had a feature screenplay and all that stuff and met this person and all that, then maybe something could have happened.
Exactly.
I mean, you never know. But my point is just like there's stuff that's happened now with my life where it's like a window open and it's like, I actually have something for this that 10 years ago I absolutely did not. You know? So, but you're really painting a great picture of how a lot of this is just your entire life. Is around it. It's like, this is where I go. This is who I hang out with. It's like this guy I knew at a job from ages ago, who asked me that one time. What's going on? And that's such a, like, it really is like, it can be just a lifestyle.
It can be, as long as you make sure that you're open to trying new things. Like, so like for me, like I've worked on so many like different types of projects, and like currently I am a co-executive producer for Sound and Visual Media and the managing director of the company, and I work with the deaf community all the time. And I actually recently got to direct a commercial for them, and it was amazing to be able to learn what it's like to like bridge the gap between the deaf and the hearing worlds. And I'm learning sign language now because of it, so that way I could sign with the deaf actors that are there, and like working with my boss who was the Dazzle on the day, which is a director of American Sign Language. Like, he was able to focus on directing the language while I was focusing on like directing the facial expressions or like the camera movements and stuff. And like, I would have never seen myself doing that even 3 years ago. Like, and now I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I get to help like uplift another community. Because I just think that's also something really important to do in art when you can. And doing those kinds of things, I've met a bunch of different people I wouldn't have met, and now I'm literally going on a work trip with them next week to LA.
Have you learned another language before?
Technically in high school, that like foreign language exploratory class,
Right.
Like I did French, but like if you asked me anything now, I'd probably forget, besides like je m'appelle Kaleigh, just my name is Kaleigh, but that's pretty much it.
Like there's the required schoolwork thing and all that, but that's really great that you're doing that. I've been having a similar experience with not the deaf community, but that it's involved learning another language.
Okay.
And one reason why I've been diving headfirst into that is just there's so many filmmakers and animators and writers that I look up to who have always said, if you're gonna make a film about like any culture or community, you need to know the language.
Agreed.
And that's not just a like English to French or ASL. It can also just be different like subcultures, even just in America. It's like if you're going to make a film about Texans, you should probably know the lingo there.
It's being authentically connected to the art you are telling. Like, that's something that I just actually learned recently when I attended a virtual panel where it's like, you want to build a relationship with the community whose story you are trying to service, but you also want to make sure that you're not being their voice.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that they have a voice in the art as well. Like, even though I got to direct that commercial, that I wasn't my final call. It was still my boss's final call, and he is a member of the deaf community. And you have to make sure that you're very conscious of that, because I do dislike when people are like, oh, I'm going to tell a story about this, and then not involve anybody, like, a part of that community. Like,
Right.
that's just wrong.
Yeah.
And then the story's actually, like, not strong at all because you didn't involve that community. But if you did, you would have gotten to learn something new and gotten more creative tricks up your sleeve.
And you're intentionally robbing yourself of the experts, like,
And the
if you do that.
experience.
Yeah, it's like, and I'm a firm believer, and this doesn't go against what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer that you can make a movie about something that you've never had any experience with.
Absolutely.
But part of why that's possible is because you're not the only person making the movie.
Well, it's that, and also research.
Yeah.
Like, if you are going to say, hey, I want to make a movie about a rocket ship, but you never took, like, any of those classes to learn how to make a rocket ship because you decided to take film class instead, well, then talk to the people that know how to make a rocket ship.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and have them on set with you as a consultant. Like, it's
and actually
super
use
important.
them and take the time for them to consult, because this is one of my pet peeves. You might know this happens, but there's historical films that will hire historical consultants so that they can put them in the credits, and they'll pay them to be on set, but they don't talk to them.
They don't listen to them.
Yeah, and that's not every movie, obviously.
Okay.
But that has happened.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not sure how common it is, but it has happened where it's like, oh yeah, we hired a bunch of historical consultants, so that in the credits it looks like they tried to do their due diligence.
It's like I did my job, but I didn't do my job.
Right. It's like it's lip service almost.
Yeah,
is
no.
what it is.
That I would never do that. I think, like, any TV show, any movie, any short film, anything that I touch, I always make sure that I have an authentic connection to the art. Like, and if I don't, then the authentic connection might be my own story, and then I'm able to use, like, things from my own life. Like, you can tell so many stories from your own life without having to really actually, like, reveal a lot of personal things. It's a hard thing to learn, but once you do, like, you have endless stories to tell, so you don't necessarily need to tell someone else's story.
On that note there, this kind of maybe sound a little bit like a leading or loaded question,
Sure.
but if this question just doesn't work, because
I will try my best.
No. Like, I just mean, like, we said about revealing more or less about your life. I don't know if this is something that has gone one way or the other for you, but have you found, if as you've gone down your writing journey, do you reveal more or less? Is that a thing that you've thought about?
I actually do have an answer to this question, surprisingly enough. So when I wrote my feature, like, oh my gosh, like 12 years ago now, I didn't know how to authentically fictionalize stuff that happened in my life. So, like, the first draft, I just threw up all over the paper. Like, it was like, this is the conversation I had with my grandma. This is the conversation I had with so-and-so. Blah, blah, blah.
It's very literal.
Oh,
for
yeah.
the experience.
But then it was garbage because it was literal. Because I was, like, so focused on what was the thing that person said. And then you read it and you're like, this isn't a story. This is just a chock full of memories. And some of these things are hurtful. Like, maybe you shouldn't do that. And so then I had to take a long time to, like, do the second draft, the third draft, the fourth draft, the fifth draft. And, like, I probably got it all the way through, like, probably like a 16th draft, to get it to a place where I was like, okay, so this is me still being authentically me, but this is also me still protecting the people that I love, and this is still a strong story to tell. So you have to be able to think about those three things if you are going to pour your heart out onto the page. And I don't think a lot of people do, because sometimes they look at that as like diary writing. And it's not supposed to be diary writing. It's supposed to feel like diary writing for you, but it's not your diary.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think that's a really cool, interesting perspective on it as well, because that's something that I've wondered a little bit about with telling personal stories, like literally personal. Like,
yes.
Because there's plenty of things that have been inspired, like moments or whatever. Like maybe a friend of mine makes a joke when we're hanging out. I'm like, hey, can I use that? You know,
yeah. I got a whole log of that on my phone.
Right.
We could do a whole segment about it. I could read all the weird ass things that my friends have said that I use in my comedies all the time, and they know it. They call it a compliment. They're like, oh, I'm funny enough to be in your script? Cool.
Now, something I've heard to talk about, like to bring in a different perspective, which isn't necessarily mine, but you talked about like protecting the guilty or innocent or whatever, like the not hurting people, for instance.
Sure.
I saw an interview one time where Tarantino was talking about writing and his personal experiences and how a lot of his films are more personal than a lot of people realize. He said, like, Kill Bill means a lot to me, but I don't necessarily want you to know why.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that might be just, I wouldn't have necessarily thought about that, because I'm like, this movie kicks ass, you know?
Yeah.
But then thinking about more and learning a bit more about his upbringing, I'm like, if I ever get to meet him, I have a couple of questions that he might not want to answer, but that's fine. But sorry, the point I'm leading up to here before I bury the lead here is,
no, you're good.
He said something, sorry if I'm misquoting him, but the sentiment was, when you make a personal film, it should make the people who know you the most a little uncomfortable, at least. Mm-hmm. That sounds a little different than from what you're doing. Is there a point at which you think you would write something that would make the people who are close to you uncomfortable? Or how would that be? That
is the work-life balance project, where I crashed into the back of the truck. The part where things got personal is actually for my partner and I. I've been dating him for 7 years, and he has no relation to the film industry whatsoever. Sometimes he will build things for me, like he made me a morgue, which was really cool. Oh. He took like titanium sheets and put them all together and made like a square. So then when you look in, if you have it with the backdrop in the right place, it looks like you're looking into like a morgue
Over My Dead
drawer.
Body?
Yep.
Yeah.
For Over My Dead Body. Yeah, he made it.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That's a featured part of the...
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite things.
Wow.
But yeah, so like he makes stuff for me sometimes, but he's also like the reminder that I need to sometimes step outside of like my own like head and my own like work life and stuff, and he's like that reminder of that work-life balance. But when I wrote Work-Life Balance, there was a moment, he will not be offended that I say this, there was a moment where when I crashed into the back of the truck, I called him and he didn't answer. So I was on the side of the road, like having a panic attack, like I had like medical all over me, police, like the tow truck guy, everything. And he didn't pick up, and that crushed me. And he still knows that crushed me, which is why there's no reason why I need to hide it. And so then I called one of my best friends, and she was like, what hospital are you going to? I'll be there right now. And she met me at the hospital. He didn't. And she got a hold of him finally, and he felt like absolute garbage because his phone was dead and he was sleeping. And he's like, I didn't know that I could have lost you because I didn't charge my phone. And I didn't change that in the script because I wanted to still be authentically me. And I think the character experiencing that, she's definitely a lot different than who I am. But I didn't change anything that happened then because it's a scary thing for people to experience. And sometimes you have to be raw. Sometimes you have to not be afraid to tell those stories, but you should seek permission first.
Right.
is how I say, like, protecting. And I did a live performance of work-life balance for my master's thesis. And he came to the thesis, and he sat in the audience, and he heard the words and was like, oh, crap, this is it. And it was a totally different experience for him to sit and watch that. But then he actually appreciated the art more because he knows me and he knows what I'm passionate about, and he knows how much of a core memory that was. So he actually became even a bigger fan of what I do because I was brave enough to stand up for myself through my art.
Wow.
Love you, Patrick.
Wow. That's, yeah, that, you know, sometimes there's projects where, like, hey, maybe this project's for fun, it's an escape, you know, whatever. And then sometimes there's projects where it does get down to you're really going for what makes cinema different from everything else, you know, or when you're doing something that I don't, there's more of a weight to it, you know, and the importance and relevance that has to you and the truth that's in it. So I think something that I do, like, even as a filmmaker, I'm still just an audience person, and so when I meet someone who's really, like, all in pursuing this craft and is doing it and is making stuff that is like just, I mean, I guess in a less eloquent way, just, hey, thank you for sharing this, like, in your work.
Yeah.
You know, because one of the things that I learned when I was 14 was how much, like, kind of, that's when I sort of realized what other people were really like. You know, it's like there's something that happened when I was 14, and I realized, kind of like the way I phrase it is, like, what everybody's going through, and that it's not just me, that kind of thing. And that's such a worthwhile endeavor and use of time and passion. So God, I'm getting emotional. Good for me. But I just thank you so much. That's such a, and thank you for sharing that story with me.
Absolutely.
Now, for the people who want to learn more about you and all that, everybody, we're going to have links in the description below, and also some of Kaleigh's work has been on Apple TV and other platforms and all that. But for the people who are about to hit that description drop down for us, can you tell us a little bit about, like, what is down there so that they can follow you up?
So it would be my Instagram link for now, for Bokeh Pictures LLC. There's a website in progress coming soon. But I'll also leave some of the articles that I've been featured in in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, so you can get a closer look at, like, more information about, like, when I'm focusing on a specific project, like where I'm at in that, like, mindset. And there is a whole article about, like, it's called An Ode to the Aimless, and it actually talks about, like, that feature that I made in my 20s and, like, how hard it was to tell, like, your own story authentically. So if you want to learn more about that, I will put that in the bio.
Absolutely.
Or description.
And we'll also have some details on titles of films and what streaming services they're on, so that you can follow up on that yourself, everybody. Kaleigh, thank you so much for spending time with me. I've enjoyed this conversation immensely.
I did too.
Awesome. And I'd love to have you back sometime.
Absolutely.
Maybe maybe do a recap episode from the 48 and talk even more about pitch decks and portfolios and stuff. I feel like we just scratched the surface on that.
Chock full of stuff. You let me know.
Awesome. And but yeah, thank you again so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I was really excited to be here.
This is my pleasure. All right, everybody, thank you for spending your time with us. And if you're the kind of person that subscribes, well, you know where that button is. But whether you do or not, we hope to see you again because we'll be here at Studio Me. And on this special episode, you, gentle viewer, have, as always, won a free tour. So come on down to Studio Me sometime. Maybe give us a call as a heads up so we can make sure everything looks nice for you. But we'd love to show you the spaces. And if you're already convinced to make something here, well, you can go to StudioMe.me and book your first or next session in one of our studios. Bye-bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioMe.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.